Okay guys, so we're here to our second video on macros. So our first video we discussed about what protein was and where we could get protein source and what proteins we should be going for. So today we're going to be covering carbohydrates. Now carbohydrates over the last few years have got a lot of hate. A lot of people are directly linking carbohydrates to obesity, morbid obesity, fat gains. So what actually are carbohydrates? Now carbohydrates are actually our body's preferred source of energy. So they break down into three subcategories. So we got something called simple or high glycemic carbohydrates. The second one is complex or low glycemic carbohydrates, and then we have good old-fashioned fibrous carbs. So what does it mean? So when it comes to simple carbohydrates, we're talking about carbohydrates the bodies are able to absorb extremely quickly through the intestines. And from that, it gets into the bloodstream very fast. So these are like a simple sugars, sugar being exact, example as well. What this results in is a spike in the body's glucogen level, glucose level, which then spikes our insulin. So this is one of the factors that leads towards people putting on a lot of weight, a lot of fat. So in general, you do want to avoid getting too much simple carbohydrates, but there is a time and place for them. So the ideal time to have simple carbohydrates is usually post-workout. So if you guys and girls have done a vigorous training and you're about to have your post-workout protein as well, another great time to have protein is post-workout. Combining that with good old-fashioned simple carbohydrates will lead to your body absorbing all that nutrition faster and then flushing it into the muscles themselves where it's required. So in general, you want to keep the simple carbohydrates lower. So that's stuff like your sugars, even your more healthier sources or natural sources of sugars like fructoses. Somewhat can be considered a little bit complex, but they do lie a little bit more on the simple side of things. So you don't want to have too much fruit, for example. Yes, fruit is fantastic. You get your 5 a day. Nowadays they're saying it's more than 5 a day, but just within reason. Like if you're eating a massive bowl of like apples and grapes and whatnot, you're still getting a shitload of sugar. So that's something to keep into account. So the next one, which we talked about, is complex carbohydrates. Now this is where I would suggest you get your main source of carbs from. So unlike the high glycemic simple sugars or simple carbohydrates, the low glycemics don't digest rapidly. So with them, unlike their counterpart, they're not producing this massive spike in blood sugar and then this the body's response, the insulin kick in. But what they do is they digest a lot slower, giving a more consistent, a more a great flow of energy throughout its digestive period. So that way you're not getting these massive crashes. So with a simple carbohydrate, once the insulin kicks in, so at first you'll feel energized, or hell, you'll be like, I'm full of sugar, and then give it a few minutes, your insulin levels upped up, and it's forced your body to absorb all that nutrition, and you no longer have access to that energy. You get a massive crash. So a lot of people get the afternoon crash. Is one of the reasons why. It's because they're not getting enough, complex carbohydrates throughout the day. So their bodies suddenly had the crash from that simple carbohydrates. So the next one I'm going to quickly go over is fibrous carbs. Now fibrous carbs, I highly recommend you guys and girls are getting plenty of this. So this is carbohydrates that are predominantly fiber, and they really help in aiding in digestion and the absorption of nutrition as well. So this is something I really recommend that you do get in your meals, especially in your later meals. As I always recommend, depending on your training schedule, try not to have too many carbohydrates after 6 p.m. After 6 p.m. you can shift them straight to fibrous carbs. So let's quickly go over some of the sources of what kind of carbohydrates, where can we get them from. So simple carbohydrates, a great source if you guys and girls, especially for post-workout, is stuff like sugar, stuff like fruit, as I mentioned, and good old-fashioned honey. And these are three great sources. A lot of people even use stuff like pixie sticks after a post-workout shake because it's pure sugar, it's pure glucose. Then when we talk about is complex carbs. Now complex carbs again, it should be your predominant source of carbohydrates. So this is stuff like sweet potato, this is stuff like oats, brown rice, brown pasta, and quinoa are great sources of complex carbohydrates. The alternatives, obviously, like when you have white potatoes, that's a little bit more on the simple carbohydrates, and the same goes with white pasta, white rice, because they've been processed. So what they've done in the manufacturing process, they've removed a lot of the germ, and they've, by processing it through the manufacturing plants, whatever you want to call it, they're kind of taking out steps that your body's natural digestion would have done. So the second you eat it, it's already gone through a lot of processing, so your body's just going to suck it up just like that. Again, time and pace, it can really be handy, but in general, just save it for your post-workout shake. And then finally, fibrous carbs. Now, one of the best sources of fibrous carbs, I highly recommend. It gets a lot of hate, this vegetables, so you guys and girls will probably be like, oh my god, he said it. Broccoli. Broccoli is phenomenal, guys. I know a lot of people aren't accustomed to eating a broccoli, and this is when your mom and dad used to tell you when you were young, eat your broccoli if you want to go strong. Broccoli is a great source of fibrous carbs, as well as broccoli has been shown to aid in hormonal regulation. And that's keeping your testosterone levels in balance, your estrogen levels in balance from a vegetable. So it's something I highly recommend. Make sure you have broccoli. And then other ones are stuff like green beans and celery. So that's a quick little video over carbohydrates. So we know what they are now. They're our preferred source of energy. We know the 3 types of them, and we know where we can get them. So when it comes to recommending how much you should be eating a day, it really depends a little bit more on your daily activity. So for example, for me, I do train quite frequently, and I look to get between 150 grams of carbohydrates throughout the day, to possibly on a higher carb day, maybe pushing near the 200. And I'm 6 foot and I weigh around about 77 kilos, so my body fat at the moment is around about 9 to 10%. And that's with me training around 4 to 5 days a week. So that's how much carbohydrates I'll have there. Again, carbohydrates are something that you can fluctuate throughout the week depending on your activity levels. Whereas protein, you can keep consistent. Carbohydrates, you can play around with it. So just say you did have a high carb day one day, the following day you can just nudge them down a little bit just to help your body regulate a little bit more. But yeah, so that's a quick little video on carbohydrates. Hopefully you understand where they are, and you see that carbohydrates are not the demon as they are seen in a lot of fat loss diets. Maintaining some carbohydrates while throwing stuff at yourself. Maintaining some carbohydrates is great for maintaining muscle mass as well. So yes, the body can access different sources of energy, stuff like ketogenesis. We'll go over that over the fat video, but carbs are still a great source, and they're very readily and very cheaply available as well. Anyhow, guys, so I hope that video helped clear up a little bit about carbohydrates. If I've missed anything, if you guys have got girls got any questions or any queries about carbs, just feel free to leave a comments below, and as always, subscribe and do give us a thumbs up, because it really does help us out massively. And yeah, I'll catch you guys and girls in a bit for the next video. So see you there. Peace. Yeah.